One of the biggest blind spots I've seen for years, and I'm still seeing it, is companies assuming that if they have an active brand in the market and their recruiters are behind the scenes doing recruiting and their salespeople are doing the one-on-one touch bases with people, that is enough. So the blind spot and how to fix it would be start thinking about every person who is client facing or candidate facing as being a mini brand within your brand. Their faces need to be known beyond the one-on-one conversations.
Hi, I'm Kortney Harmon, Director of Industry Relations at Crelate. This is the Full Desk Experience's Industry Spotlight Series.
Welcome back to the Full Desk Experience, where we talk about growth blockers across people, processes, technologies in this wonderful staffing and recruiting industry. I'm your host, Kortney Harmon, Director of Industry Relations at Crelate, and I am thrilled to welcome Kelli Schutrop to the show. Kelli is the CEO and founder of Thoughtful Resound. She's a thought leadership activation firm that accelerates revenue across growing B2B companies. And Kelli, you can smack me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff. And she's had over 15 years of experience in talent acquisition marketing, and she's partnered with more than 155 clients, helping establish powerful brand presence and driving growth. Kelli is a LinkedIn learning instructor, speaker, co-host of the Full Cup Collective. I think I'm allowed to say that since that's just new. Strategic marketing breakthroughs for growth barriers. And I am so excited to pick her brain, because we've been talking about how to thrive in 2025. And I think Kelli is the perfect guest to make this all go together. So Kelli, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to talk to me. And what did I get wrong?
Hi, Kortney. Thanks for having me. You didn't get anything wrong. I'm impressed. You pronounced the last name right, which going on 14 years or so, I'm still trying to pronounce that name right that I married into. So great job. Yeah, I'm happy to share a little bit more about my background and how I got into this space.
Yeah, like more like your journey, like how did you get into this crazy space? And then more about your company and kind of what you do for firms. That would be amazing.
Sure, I'd be happy to share. So going all the way back to undergrad, I majored in PR and marketing. So I've always really enjoyed the space of marketing and essentially helping companies and brands get their message out. And after undergrad, I went into the ad agency world and then met someone in the staffing industry. And as we all do, fell into the space. This particular individual was fantastic. She had started her own boutique executive search firm. And she said, I need someone to build marketing from the ground up. And I don't even know what all that entails, but I need that. And I said, I don't know anything about the world of staffing and recruiting, but I would love to learn that. And I'd love to build marketing from the ground up. That sounds so fun. And so I did that with her. He then merged with a boutique RPO, or recruitment process outsourcing company. And a lot of people don't know this about my journey, but I went from doing marketing within her company, also learning the ropes of recruiting, doing Boolean searches, working with candidates, to then pivoting into the RPO that had established clients. And I went in-house and they didn't need marketing. So all my marketing came off my desk and I started doing more of the internal relations with hiring managers, sourcing candidates, all of that. And what I realized is that two things. One, I have a huge appreciation for our industry. Two, I liked marketing for it more than I liked doing it. I had a knack for it, but it wasn't feeding my soul. And so essentially started having some conversations, and that individual got recruited to join the largest single site privately held executive search and consulting firm in the Minneapolis area. And she pulled me with her. They were looking for a marketing manager, looking for someone to essentially do that same process, right? Build from the ground up from a marketing standpoint. And I was with that family of companies for over a decade in a variety of roles, a variety of brands within that family of companies, starting with managing marketing, anything related to marketing communications, right? So we're talking events, PR, content, social, like soup to nuts, all of the elements, and then partnering closely with people that were doing SEO and paid. So really got my arms around that full breadth of the brand side of marketing, but also the digital side of marketing. And then I raised my hand and said, CEO, who I've worked with forever and really appreciate where we're growing. I'm ready for something new. The company is growing, but I know it's not growing fast enough for me to level up and to level the person up under me. Is there anything I'm not thinking about within our organization that I could step into? And he said, well, actually, we have been partnering with some local clients. I mean, the big mega brands, but like local clients not in the staffing industry on their digital marketing. would you be interested in helping us basically shape that digital marketing offering for the staffing industry? Because it's the space we know really well. And at that time, the company had just hit a year of 50% of revenue had come from marketing sources, which was just awesome. Like it was a really cool, well-oiled machine. And I said, yes, sign me up. This sounds fantastic. So after I said that, I started to hit a little bit of the, oh, shoot, I know how to do marketing. I know how to do rebrands. I've managed multiple of them. So as I help us, launch this new brand in the marketplace, that's comfort zone. What isn't comfort zone is the sales part. I had done retail sales and I'm very extroverted. I love building relationships, but I didn't want to be viewed as a commodity. And I was actually just really experiencing a lot of that fear of failure. Like, I know I'm good at marketing, but what if I'm not good at selling? And we also don't have our processes quite established yet. We've got clients, but we haven't sold this in a classic way. And so I put on the hat of marketing, sales, project management, account management as the delivery team did excellent work. And Parka was the name of the company. It's since pivoted. Parka now sits in more of the tech stack space, working a lot with Bullhorn and Salesforce. It's not considered a digital marketing agency anymore. They've taken it in a different direction. But when I was with that brand for 4 or 5 years, I was able to partner with, like you mentioned, over 150 organizations within the staffing community. And the reason why this is relevant to my story and what I'd love people to hear for 2025 is that I approached sales in a different way than most people did. And it worked really, really well for me. I approached it through that lens of thought leadership. So instead of saying, I'm going to pick up the phone, I'm going to cold call, personally, I just didn't want to be viewed as a commodity. Like I said, I didn't want people to not want to answer my call. That didn't feel fun. But I had all this information from years of experience in a space that these companies were really trying to seek out for themselves. So I started hosting fireside chats and guest appearing on podcasts and speaking at conferences and doing webinars, and every other week hopping on camera with a 2 or 3 minute, here's something that our clients and our industry is facing that you can do internally to solve it yourself, right, within the digital marketing landscape. And what that turned into is a mechanism that went from, ads running on LinkedIn and getting people from time to time to 95% of the people I worked with came inbound because they saw what I was doing on LinkedIn. They saw our brand in the market. And in fact, 2 weeks ago, I got reached out to someone who I'd connected with. I just realized this back in 2021 with just a simple connection request. Hey, so-and-so, saw you on here. I love connecting with other people who are passionate about the staffing and recruiting industry. Cheers. That was it. And then a few weeks later, had sent a message of our resources, right? Like, here's free resources. Didn't do anything else, right? It wasn't a chasing mode. Well, anyway, fast forward a number of years, and this individual reached out. Their company has a need, and now we're partnering. And it's just really cool to see how content that you create and put out into the world to elevate your audience can work behind the scenes for you. So anyway, I know this is a long answer, but to fast forward to where we are today, I was with that family of brands for a number of years and then had the opportunity to create LinkedIn learning courses. So I have 4 on there around digital marketing and personal branding. And then that organization that creates digital learning courses hired me in-house to do sales and marketing. And it was from there that I realized that not every company approaches sales through that lens of thought leadership. And I really had a deep passion for it. And so I launched Thoughtful Resound about 1.5 years ago. I've now partnered with 15 organizations over that time in the B2B professional service space. I've got a few outliers that are in different industries, but mostly in that, boutique size where they've got, call it 30 to 50 people in-house, sometimes even smaller. They're trying to figure out, how do we do marketing better instead of just check the boxes, but also how do we turn our sales people and our key leaders into thought leaders so that business comes to us. And so I work with a select number of clients on retainer at a time. I have a few in advisory, but I also do marketing strategies. So let's look at your year, what you need to be doing, trainings in that space. So I digress. That's a long story. That's what I'm doing now. I'm having a ton of fun, and I co-founded a networking community based in Minneapolis called Full Cup Collective. So that's what that was that you referenced in the intro.
So many things. I love it. And I love the perspective that you bring. It's not just, this is what I've fallen into. Like, this is what I believe. It is like, it's etched in my own fabric of who I am to help these people. So I love that. And I can't wait, because honestly, Kelli, our theme this year, and we heard so many things last year. It was like, survive till 25. And guess what? We're here. We've arrived. Stop having the, oh, woe is me. Okay, how do I change my business versus, okay, we're waiting on the other foot to drop, or, we're waiting. So how do we change? So I want you to think about it from your lens. We're here, we've arrived, we're thriving in 2025. We're not just surviving. As a thought leadership expert, what do you believe staffing and recruiting firms need to start doing now to position themselves for success over the next year? Because this isn't like do it today, see the results today.
It's fascinating. Our industry evolved from people sitting at desks with telephone books, cold calling, to, oh, well, we have websites, we can do SEO, we can do paid, we can get in front of people that way, to now LinkedIn is promoting video and video that's under a minute because of TikTok and Instagram and just this way that we digest and consume content. And I would argue that even since the pandemic, it's become a really beautiful thing to be able to connect with people, even if you're not physically in a coffee shop with them or in your office with them. So I would recommend, in order for staffing and recruiting firms to thrive in 2025, is stop thinking about your marketing and how you get in front of people and your sales as only represented by your brand. You need to think about yourself as a brand as well. So who are you when you show up in a conversation with a prospective client? And of course, there's a whole world of candidates and recruiting, but let's just talk for a second about business development, because I know that's a really big need across our industry, especially last year and coming into this year. What I often hear is when someone gets in a client conversation, when they get the at bat, so to speak, it's great. They're like, great, yes, I'll get the search every time. Like I'll be able to engage with them. And I'll also say our industry is so unique that essentially you're doing sales before getting paid if you're in the contingent space. So why would a client not want to partner other than maybe just their bandwidth of managing a lot of partners? So we can address that in a separate conversation, probably around like differentiators and how you really approach that. But if you have success when you're in the conversation, part of the challenge is just getting more conversations. And in order to do that, my recommendation is show up where your audience shows up. So you think about the associations and the industry events that your ideal clients spend time at. You might already attend those events. You probably do. You might sponsor those events, but are you trying to speak at them? Like, what are you doing to really like get active in that community and be seen as the person that's sharing that knowledge, right? Give away your secret sauce, so to speak, for free, because our industry doesn't honestly have a lot of secret sauce. It's more the clients want to know, do you do a good job? And do I like working with you? Right? Like those are the big elements. But then also think about how to show up online, because most people in this space, your hiring managers and the people you want to get in front of are on LinkedIn. And so are you showing up? If you post once a week on LinkedIn, you are in the top percentage of the entire usage of this platform. So even if you can say, all right, I'm on Zoom calls all the time, I could just hop into a Zoom call by myself and hit record and talk for 2 minutes about topics that I often hear come up from my prospects and from my clients. So that's what I would encourage you to do, is create a list of those common pain points that you're hearing that to you feel like a no-brainer. For example, all right, if you can shorten the interview process, if you can make your onboarding process smoother, if you can do these types of things, you will have better odds of getting the candidates you want and retaining the right talent. Like those are the types of things that can help just become familiar in your audience's space. And of course, there's all sorts of marketing tactics that you can utilize to get that in front of the right audience. But those are two areas that I've not seen people utilize a lot. And I think there's space to it. So one being get active on video, in content on LinkedIn, and two, get more active in the associations from a speaking standpoint and or join a committee or a board so that you have that opportunity to meet people who you'd love to work with, but in a non-selling capacity. Because if you're on the membership committee, you're welcoming and onboarding them to the group. Or if you're in the programming or events committee, you get to decide who speaks. And maybe you decide that you're the moderator of a panel that you bring in. So a lot of opportunities just to start showing up a bit differently in our space that can bring in revenue.
I love it. And it's not a hard sell. We see that from our side. I speak at conferences. And I think my perspective from who I am and the salesperson going to those same events are two different things. I want to go into what do you anticipate? So you just told us what we could think about. Staffing is constantly evolving. However, the foundations are very fundamental, right? It's not rocket science, but things are changing. So based on the experience you have with all of your clients, what shifts do you anticipate in the industry by 2025 that leaders could be preparing differently for? You just said how to meet these people, but how can they continue to prepare differently for our evolving landscape?
We've seen such a surge in AI, which means everybody and their mom, including in our industry, is getting really noisy on the digital platforms, right? Like there's a ton of emails, there's a ton of email because now everybody is a copywriter. Everybody can send these mass messages. And obviously like email marketing and marketing automation existed before AI was prominent, but now it's just even more noisy. And so I would encourage people to think about how do you continue to have that personal touch involved? Because what I think we're going to see is even more of a commoditized approach in the staffing industry. And I think we're going to end up, unfortunately, seeing more of a consolidation of companies that stay in business. Because the ones that are just trying to like throw resumes at walls and send as many emails out as possible, there's still only so many jobs that need to be filled. And so if hiring managers are hearing just noise from someone, and they're, on the other hand, developing an authentic relationship with someone else, the people that are able to develop those authentic relationships are going to get the business. And I think the organizations that are just getting noisier and noisier are probably not going to survive. And so as hard as that is to say, I think leaning into this world of how do you become an expert on what you do, even if there are 17 other competitors in your city that offer the exact same thing, part of it is just showing up and sharing the challenges that your clients are having. I like to say, make your clients' problems visible and solvable. Because if you can say, this is what you're probably experiencing and this is how you can solve it, when they hit a point where they're not able to solve it in-house or they're not able to solve it with their current partners, who do you think they're going to call next, right? They're going to call the person who has been sharing the information. So that's what I think we'll see. Unfortunately, is I think we're going to see a consolidation of the industry, but I think there's ways to combat that and bolster around that as yourself, is just getting to be more human with your brand, not just the what is my brand at large, but what are my individual people doing to get in the community.
I just did a panel yesterday. We had an executive search specific focus panel, and I had asked a similar question. And it was funny because someone said, we changed our value prop. And I'm like, elaborate more. And it was like, we turned away clients. We focused and doubled down on what we were good at. And we made our value about them, not about us. And it was she said, it has changed their business for the positive around 2 mil. And they have less people with better outcome. So, and it's just amazing to say when you change the lens in which you look at things and how you service clients, we always talk here, it's like, get out of the transactional, get to the consultative. But sometimes people don't know what that means or how to accomplish that. And I think just even some of the things you're talking about today, being where they are, those are the things that matter and really, truly move your business. So I'm going to try not to go on a rant, but I want to know your opinion on this. One of my core beliefs is that many firms are what we call like the KPI hamster wheel, right? It's transactional. Tracking metrics that don't drive growth. Like pick your brain. How do you help companies identify and focus marketing metrics that truly matter? Because let's face it, these things that you're talking about, attribution is hard to track. It's hard to understand if they're making an impact, when they're making an impact. So talk to me about that.
Yes, I know the world of KPIs, right? Key performance indicators. And out of my 15 years in this space, half of it was managing marketing. The other half was doing consultative selling and being accountable for a book of business and driving that growth. And so when I think about KPIs, I actually think about it through both marketing and sales. So at the highest level, if the CEO or whomever is trying to figure out if this is working, whatever's being invested into, if they were on a desert island and they couldn't talk to anyone else on their team, what numbers would they need to see to understand impact? So to me, those are the types of KPIs to track. Yes, there is nuance and detail too. If you send out a monthly newsletter, how many people opened it and what that looks like that the marketing person can look into. But can we take that a step deeper? And what the CEO, I would imagine, would care about is like, okay, great, people opened the newsletter or less people opened this newsletter. Who are those people and what was their intent, right? So starting to dig into who actually clicked on this. Like, is there intel that we can feed back to the sales team to say, this person clicked through 3 of the links? Maybe reach out to them. It might be a good time to re-engage in that conversation. So when I think about KPIs for marketing, there's a lot of details in the weeds that typically a marketer does need to track, but they can start formulating the story by really tying it back to what's happening in the sales and recruiting realm. And oftentimes, sales in their ATS has one drop down that says source, and that's it. And it might be Indeed or ZipRecruiter or this event that we hosted or whatever. But the more that you can create a full picture and encourage your team to just share, yeah, actually, I guess they have been saying they've been seeing what I'm doing on LinkedIn or whatever that might look like. You can help to paint that picture of what is working. And a classic example would be if your staffing firm uses 3 different job boards and nobody ever marked the source. And so the team cut one of the job boards and you're like, shoot, I had a third of my placements from that. It doesn't matter unless you're reporting it, right? And so I think it's really important for sales and marketing to have dialogues back and forth. And oftentimes somebody has to trigger that. It's not going to happen on its own. So if you are sitting here listening to this from a marketing standpoint, you have to drive that and basically ask, can I have a conversation about the placements that we're having? Like once a month, can we meet up with the people that are getting more active in their community or being more active on LinkedIn or fill in the blank? And like, let's just dialogue anecdotally. What are they seeing and what are they experiencing? Now, on the sales side, I have helped staffing firms with this where organizations, like for a specific example, one is very strong in staffing and has recently moved into the more direct hire space. And so I established a scorecard of like, how do we track, right? I don't remember what I did in my to-do list on Tuesday, right? Like I can tell you the major themes of what I'm working on for clients, but like, you know, your 20 little things that you're doing, I don't know how many of us remember every single day, every single week what we do. And so if you were to ask one of your salespeople last week, what are your numbers? What are you doing? You fall into one of 2 camps. Either you're structured because your leadership team came out of the Robert Halfs of the world and you've got every KPI dialed to the nth degree, or maybe you're more boutique and it's more relational based and you don't have that tracked unless a placement occurs. So I think there's somewhere in between to say, first of all, what's happening from a meeting standpoint, submittals, placements, all of those types of things, but also what are you doing, salesperson, that can impact, right? Like, are you at networking events? Are you posting on LinkedIn? Like, what are you doing? So starting to incorporate some of those classic marketing metrics into the sales metrics help to share and to paint that picture.
Well, what you're saying, everybody needs to have good intentions, but I'm sure there's blind spots in this process. And since you've worked with numerous staffing companies throughout your career, what are some common blind spots that you've observed that you can kind of give our audience some insight to and maybe how to prevent them from reaching their full potential?
One of the biggest blind spots I've seen for years, and I'm still seeing it, is companies assuming that if they have an active brand in the market and their recruiters are behind the scenes doing recruiting and their salespeople are doing the one-on-one touch bases with people, that is enough. So the blind spot and how to fix it would be start thinking about every person who is client facing or candidate facing as being a mini brand within your brand. Like their faces need to be known beyond the one-on-one conversations.
So the company's not enough anymore. That's what you're telling me.
The company's not enough anymore. Yep. And you do need to have a company presence. You do need to have a strong website. You do need to be active on social, but you can't just do that. Like you need to have trusted experts built into your organization, because when you think about, all right, my prospect is at this event. There are dozens of recruiters showing up to this event. It's not enough anymore for someone to say, oh yeah, I know that recruiting firm, or I don't know that recruiting firm. Like they need to build that relationship with that person. And if I were to ask you right now, let's say you need an accountant. Let's say you need a this. Let's say you need a that. If you have a person in your life or someone you follow on LinkedIn that does that thing, whether or not they're the right one to hire, would they not be one of your first reach outs to say, hey, I want to at least have a conversation? So the more visible your team can get themselves in the spaces that your ideal audience has spent time, the better likelihood you have of standing out and ultimately generating more revenue.
I'm going to ask you the double-edged sword question, because I've talked to owners that are like, yeah, I understand that's important, but then my person's going to get bigger than my company and they're going to pick up and leave and they're going to take all my business with me. Like I can hear someone listening to this podcast to be like, oh my gosh, like it gives me anxiety just thinking about that. What do you tell those people? Because you know as well as I do, people work with people. And, they connect with the people and the recruiters that they're working with and often follow them. So if from a company's perspective, that might be a little taboo to be like, I'm going to lift my people up and put them out to the world and hope all is best. How do you subside those fears? What do you tell them?
Here's the reality of it. As much as that is a real fear, would you rather experience 50 or 75% of the watermelon that person brings in today, even if it's not for the rest of their career? Or do you want to have a smaller watermelon brought in because they are not producing as much business while they're with your company, right? Like, we don't live in the space anymore where people are lifelong within one organization unless you're the founder of it, or maybe a few key individuals. So at some point, the people that are on your team are going to transition on. And that's just the nature of it. So I tend to have a mentality of the tide rises all ships, right? Like, pay it forward. It is rare that someone who you treat well is going to turn around and bite you in the back. Like, yes, that I'm sure does exist to a degree somewhere, but they're already known. I think that's the common misconception is that your recruiters, your salespeople, if they're good at what they do, they're not sitting in a hole in their home office with no one knowing about them. They're already probably getting opportunities themselves to go to competitors, to step out on their own, right? So my thought process is elevate them while they're with your organization. It's actually going to drive more revenue for your organization while they're there if you enable them to be active. And I actually haven't come across too many organizations in the last few years that have that mindset. It was more in years past where I was seeing that. In fact, I came across one company, only one ever, but it was fascinating to me, where I was doing research because they had reached out to the digital agency that I was with prior, asking about digital marketing services. And I saw 2 profiles for the person who reached out. And I was like, this is weird. Other than the fact that one profile is more built out and has a color headshot and the other one is less built out and has a black and white headshot. This is the same information. This is the same person. I got on the phone with them and they said, our organization creates a duplicate profile for everyone when they're hired so that all of their recruiting activities go through the company profile. So if they leave, they can't take that with them. And it felt so babysitting-esque to me that I would imagine that there's people who chose not to work there. And I mean, I would never reveal the name, but I don't even recall the name. But it was fascinating. So most companies don't operate to that level of lockdown. Most companies, I think, have the mindset of, you know what? Let's do good work for our clients. Let's do good work for our candidates. Elevate my people. And if they choose to go off on their own at some point, I don't have control over that right now anyway. Right? Like, would you not, I mean, on a tangible basis, would you not generate more revenue right now while you can, if they're good at what they do and they're with your organization now?
Okay, how do you take it one step further? Because I think that's probably a question on how to execute well. Obviously, personal brand's important. How should staffing leaders approach connecting the two? Because in reality, they're separate, yet they're linked. Do you help develop content for them? Do you give them suggestions? Like, how do you make sure this is related to this? Do you know what I mean?
Are you asking if a staffing firm owner knows that it's important to get their people as a face of the brand, how do they empower them to do that?
How do they empower them to do that? And then maybe share the right content. I think that's part of the other thing that I've seen. I see organizations, they have their employees there, and not that it can't be their own, because it is their own, right? But then how do you also like build the idea to be like, here's the things you can share? I spoke to someone yesterday that been in this industry for many years, posted his first post yesterday or this past week on LinkedIn, but at a very successful staffing firm. So like, I think there's a lot of, whether it's angst or there's a lot of ideas of, well, I can't post it because it's not the perfect video, so I'm going to second guess everything that I ever do. There's a lot of that, but like, how do we help them? How do we aid them as a staffing agency to say, this is the right thing and here's how to do it? Or here, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. Because there is trepidation around, what do I post? How do I approach that? All of those things. And actually, I'm working with a company right now that is a large multi-billion-dollar organization, different industry, and they're approaching that same thing. Like, how do we teach our leaders how to be more active? And so some of the crash course recommendations I have is encourage your people to post once a week, no matter what. And I'll get back to the what and how and why in a second. But part of that reason, and I felt this when I was starting out being active on LinkedIn, if you only have one post in the back of your mind and you don't know when you're going to post next, there is so much weight riding on that post, right? Because you're like, oh, it flopped. I'm never doing that again. But if you're like, you know what, I'm going to do one a week, or I'm going to do two a week, or whatever that number is, it's just one of many. You're creating a body of work. Like you could think about it like an artist, right? They might have hundreds of paintings over their career. And if one isn't their favorite, it's okay. It's a body of work. And even if two people interact with the one post that you create, it's still living there on your LinkedIn profile. So if you are reaching out to someone, if somebody refers you and they come back and they look at you, it still lives there. So it doesn't need to be, oh, I didn't have a million people like it the first time. It's still a part of your brand. Now, I know that can also be the scary thing of like, it lives on. What if it's not good? How do I approach this? So there are 3 words that became my mantra when I was posting twice a week, no matter what. Now I do once a week, no matter what, because I have different business objectives. As a solopreneur, purposefully, I have a fractional sales and marketing business, and I don't have an agency model where I'm trying to work with 4, 6, or 8, or 10 new clients every single month. I work with a select few. I can take about a project on a month, but my retainer clients, I only have so much space for them. And so I'm really selective with how that looks. So I'm not in active business development mode constantly, excuse me. But most companies are that are listening to this podcast. Like you're like, the more people that are the right people I can talk to, let's bring them in. So when I was in that mindset, I filtered all of my posts through these 3 words: credible, insightful, relatable. And I'll define those in a second. So if they hit those, then they had a space on my LinkedIn. So if it's credible, if it made my prospects go, oh, wow, that's impressive, it had a space. So that could be an award, an anniversary, a story about a client that we've helped, even without mentioning the brand. Like, here's something that we did for our clients that someone else could see themselves in. Speaking somewhere, things that just make people stop and go, oh, wow, she knows her stuff. They know their stuff. So that's credible. Those don't happen very often, right? Unless you're out on a speaking track, like those things are few and far between. So make sure to think about them and celebrate them when they happen, and think about those client stories that are successes that you can tell. 2 is insightful. So there's a lot of room for this. So this is where you're teaching your audience something that you can elevate them and give them information. This can be resharing a blog that your company posts. This can be, I was recently in this conversation and somebody mentioned XYZ and I thought other people could also benefit from the response I gave them. Like that kind of an approach. Or it could even be as simple as you saying, I don't know what to post. I just can't quite think about how I want to share this or what I'd want to share. But your ideal audience spends time within associations and organizations. Well, those groups produce content. So you literally can reshare some of the content that those associations share, and you're being insightful. And then relatable, I think, is also really important. So these are maybe something about your family or something about your work-life balance routine, or how you want to have a work-life balance routine, like whatever it might be. Like I posted something a while back about a walking treadmill that I got because I wanted to be more active. And my gosh, that post is one of the most engaged posts I had because so many people could relate to it. It didn't tell them what I offer. It didn't tell them how I help clients. What it did is help them see themselves in it. And it was able to reach a broader audience and make people feel welcome and connected. And so content that is insightful, credible, and relatable can help with that. And then, of course, there's the type of content, right? The easiest is like, do like copy, like write your copy and include an image. Video is really promoted through LinkedIn right now, especially under 60-second vertical videos. I mean, literally, we all have iPhones or Android or whatever you use. Like you can get a good background and just record something of like, I was recently experiencing XYZ. There's a good example of that. I'm going to give her a shout out. Her name is Mindy Romero, Mindi, and then Romero. She is a recruiter for construction leadership, and she has been producing really nice vertical videos that really share insights with her audience. Another great one is Amy Volas, Volas. She does recruiting for, if I'm going to get this right, companies that are in startup and scale up mode that are hiring their first sales leader and get it wrong a lot of times. And so she is educating on how to not get that wrong because it is a critical hire. And so creating video content is another great way to stand out in the newsfeed. So anyway, all that to say, there are steps you can take. Try to be active once a week. Try not to think about it as a pass and fail. And the last 2 things I'll share about posting content. 1, tell your team when you post content, even if you can get 1 buddy or 2 buddies who you know will click like within a couple minutes of you posting, that can help a lot within the algorithm because LinkedIn says, people like this content. I'm going to keep sharing it with people. I've had posts. I mean, I've got over 10,000 followers that I'm blessed to be able to share information with. I have had content that has gone dark where I posted it super late because I really wanted to get it out, but like nobody was spending time online or whatever it might be. And people just didn't see it. And I knew that the content was valuable to a lot of the people that I have in my network, but LinkedIn literally stopped sharing it. Or showing it in the newsfeed because it has a lot to prioritize. So the more you can get people interacting with it within that first 20 minutes, the better. The other way that you can do this is by rallying your own network. So we are all in our industry very active, or most people are active on LinkedIn, and you're probably commenting on your connections, your prospects, just supporting people in your industry and in your network. If you can time that around when you do your post, it's actually going to boost your post in the algorithm. So if you post your content and then you go out and you comment on a few people's posts that you would love to have see yours, what LinkedIn does is goes, Kelli and Kortney are buddies. And Kelli just commented on Kortney's post. The next time Kortney is on, I'm going to show her Kelli's content. So that can be a really nice way of approaching social selling to your prospects. Like, support them, get active in their content because it makes you visible and recognizable and human to them, but also they'll be more likely to see your content as well.
I love it. Amazing. I feel like it's ever changing. Like yesterday, it would have a different algorithm, and today it's different. And gosh, I feel like I'm just getting older and older. I feel like the old person. I'm like, I can't keep up with all this technology. But there's a method to the madness, what it comes down to.
I would encourage people to think about LinkedIn like boots on the ground networking happy hour, right? Like you go to a conference and you're standing at a high top and there's discussion happening. If you walk by a table and someone says something cool, whether they're a prospect or not, and you're like, oh my gosh, I really want to hear that. Like, you're going to join into the conversation. You're going to chime in. You're going to add value. If you can think about the way that you interact with people on LinkedIn in that same way, generally speaking, LinkedIn's algorithm is going to reward that because it's trying to reward authentic human behavior. Literally just banned Apollo and one other, I forget which SaaS platform it was, from the automated AI setup that it had because it was starting to be a problem from a spamming standpoint. And that by the time this releases, that may be reversed. But my whole point is to say, whether it's Google or LinkedIn or whatever, algorithms in general try to reward the behavior that they want to see. And people prefer authenticity. So the more you can think about it through that lens of like, if I post content that adds value, if I interact with my audience, that adds value to their lives. Like, those are the things that LinkedIn in general will always promote, I think.
We talk a lot about LinkedIn, and I know that's kind of my world. Is there any other channels that you would recommend? I'm not going to lie. I've heard a lot about Reddit lately in the recruiting industry. And so, like, is there any other things that people from staffing agencies and, staffing firms should think of to say, is there another channel that I need to look into for 2025 in order to thrive?
Great question. I have heard rumblings about Reddit a lot more lately, too. I think a lot of that is going to come down to the audience you want to get in front of. So if your clients and your candidates spend time on LinkedIn, make sure you're there. If they spend time somewhere else, make sure you're there. And it will probably take a little bit of research because our beautiful industry is such a crazy varied tapestry, right? I've got one client that focuses on the highest level executive retained search for privately held companies. They're like the Corn Ferry for privately held boutique companies. That is a very night and day different and just as important as a company that does high volume staffing in a manufacturing warehouse. Now, the client audience of the one and the client audience of the other could not be more different. And so it all comes down to, where does the audience spend time? So for some companies, being active on Meta or Threads or Reddit might be just as relevant as LinkedIn. I have historically leaned more and more into the client side of things because most companies over the years in the staffing industry want more clients and they can find candidates. Obviously, there's nuances, right? Especially with skilled trades being a bit of a different pivot right now with people not going into that space as much. But yeah, I think it all comes down to where your audience is.
I love it. I'm going to ask you one more question, and I know we're coming to time. So if you had to give one piece of advice to staffing and recruiting leaders who want to position their firms for growth and success in 2025, what would it be?
I would tell them to think of 2 to 3 pillars that you add value into your current clients or your current candidates. and talk about those on LinkedIn. So if there are topics that continually come up with prospects and clients that you're always like, oh my gosh, why do my clients not understand this? Or everybody's facing this. There's probably even more people out there that you don't even realize need to hear that topic. So if you can create those as content pillars, and that is a fancy way of saying, just talk about that, share it, right? Like post about it, share stories about it, get active about it. Whenever you hear those aha moments on the other side of the phone or the other side of the coffee table, those are the types of things that you should be sharing more, because it is going to create over time that inbound pipeline for you, because people understand that you get it and you can help them.
Great piece of advice. I love that. I need to start doing more of that myself. There's just not enough hours in a day.
Likewise. Yeah. Right. It's true. These are all things that I have to remind myself of too. And even if you can just set aside 15 minutes twice a week to say, I'm going to get my thoughts down. You know, I tend to keep a running list in my phone anytime I think of an idea, so that when I have a window to post it, then I've got those topics. So I'd encourage someone to do that too.
Well, I love it. I can't thank you enough for sharing your insights, valuable knowledge that you've kind of experienced over the years, not just been there, but you've done it. So thank you so much. I think our perspectives and how we approach 2025 to be a growth year is we just have to make those actions be a little bit differently. So thank you so much for your time, Kelli. I greatly appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, Kortney. I really appreciate it. This has been a fun conversation.